Hello, everyone, and welcome to our press conference for the county executive signing of the legislation recently passed by the Westchester County Board of Legislators on gun safety warnings needing to be posted where guns are sold in Westchester County. Because this is an ongoing problem, I'm going to ask that we begin this press conference with a moment of silence for the 10 people who were killed in gun violence in Buffalo, for the 19 students and 2 educators who were killed by gun violence in Texas, and yesterday, the 4 people killed by gun violence in Tulsa, and every single day, the 110 Americans who die by gun violence every single day here in America. So just join me for a quick moment of silence in memory of those victims. Thank you. So I'm very pleased to be here to convene this press conference. This is a piece of legislation that the county board has been working on for many years, and I'm very happy to be joined by several of my colleagues, some of whom you'll hear speak. First off, I'd like to introduce Legislator Ben Boykin, Legislator Mary Jane Shimsky, Legislator Erica Pierce, Legislator Damon Marr, Legislator Vidat Gashi, who are all here in support, and our former colleague, Legislator Ruth Walter, who was the one who brought this piece of legislation to us in her first term on the County Board of Legislators. This, as I mentioned, this is a piece of legislation that we passed at our last board meeting. We're very delighted to be here on June 2nd, the day before the day Wear Orange for Gun Violence Day. This site is chosen specifically because in the prior administration, there was gun shows here at the Westchester County Center. That is something that we ended when George Latimer became county executive, and then we passed it into law at the County Board of Legislators. So this is a site that's chosen symbolically. First up, I would like to ask the chair of the board's legislation committee, Colin Smith, to talk a little bit about the legislation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And can everyone hear me? Okay. So I'm very proud to be here today, very excited to be here today as the board, as the chair of the board's legislation committee, to have been involved in helping shepherd this process through for this very important legislation. It's also an honor to stand here with my former colleague, Ruth Walter, who was the legislator who introduced this bill and to whom we all should give a round of applause, I'd say. Legislator Walters is dedicated to many things, and this was one of her passions, so it's really an honor and a privilege to be here to help see it through to fruition today. Like our county gun storage law, I'm going to just put these up a little bit, that's okay. All right. This is a basic, sensible, and safety gun measure. It doesn't infringe on anyone's right or suggest somehow that gun buyers are criminals. It's a gentle reminder, rather, to gun buyers that there are risks involved with having a weapon in the home that can reach beyond just the gun owner to anyone who comes into the household. This legislation will require every person, firm, or corporation located in the county of Westchester and engaged in the retail business of selling weapons to post a notice in the place where such weapons or firearms are displayed or delivered to the purchaser, and in at least one additional area where sales occur, conspicuously stating the label, which I'm not going to read verbatim, but which includes information on gun safety statistics, also information on suicide prevention. As we know, a gun is far more dangerous in the home than it is just about anywhere else. And one of the more troubling statistics that I heard just yesterday is that gun-related deaths are now the number one, or the leading cause of children in the United States, surpassing motor vehicle accidents. So this is an epidemic of massive proportions, and today's legislation, while it will not eliminate the issues surrounding gun violence, it is a step in the right direction. Knowledge is power, and we want people who are considering purchasing firearms to know exactly the risks that are entailed so that they can prepare themselves and protect themselves and their families safely when owning or purchasing a gun. Thank you.
Thank you, Legislator Smith. Next up, we're going to have Legislator Jewel Williams-Johnson, who took up this bill in her first term and is the primary sponsor, in addition to being the chair of the Board of Legislators Health and Mental Health Committee. Legislator Johnson.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I am honored and more than proud to be here. I would just echo my colleague, Legislator Colin Smith, on everything he said. I was going to say. I'm sorry about that. But I, too, must publicly thank former legislator Ruth Walter. Her dedication and passion to this issue is more than admirable, and I'm right there with her, was more than happy to take this on and see it through. And I also must commend my Health Committee co-chair, Vice Chair, Legislator Erica Pierce. I must definitely thank Barry for all of his work, Moms on Demand, and all of their advocacy. As Legislator Smith said, this gun violence has surpassed all indicators of death for children and is now a national pediatric crisis. So our Health Committee plans to do more, but we can't say enough that people need to be more than aware of the consequences, the risk and fatality that is a risk when you have a gun in the home. And if this gun warning label saves one suicidal death, one domestic violence gun issue, or one child death, it is more than worth it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Legislator. So well said. Next up, we have the New York chapter of the Moms Demand Action volunteer, Barry Graubart, who's someone who has taught us all, everyone standing here, a tremendous amount about the statistics surrounding gun violence in America, that unless it touches you directly, you don't maybe realize what a widespread problem this is. But unfortunately, it's beginning to touch everyone directly, as we see every single day. There's a new indication of gun violence death in America. So Barry, please take it away.
Thank you, Chairwoman Borgia. Thank you, Chairwoman Borgia. Thank you, Board of Legislators, County Executive Latimer. Really appreciate everybody getting together on this. I think back, Legislator Walter came to me a couple of years ago now and said, Moms Demand Action, we focus largely on the national level and on the state level. So what can we be doing locally? And we started conversations and looking at policies that would make sense. So today's the fruition of that effort, and carried by Legislators Johnson, Agashi, and others. And I love here because we've got the northern part of the county, a little more rural. I'm a city kid, so that seems really rural to me. The lower part of the county. This is not a political issue, a partisan issue. It's not a regional issue. Gun violence affects all of us. So I appreciate everybody coming together. Just a couple of quick things. While the horrific events of Buffalo and Uvalde are where the media focuses, what we know is that every single day in America, on average, 110 people die of gun violence. Twice that number are injured, and the trauma and the impact of those resonates throughout the communities. So this is a huge issue, and we're really looking for creative ways to solve it. We know that presence of a gun in the home increases the likelihood, 5 times more likely that a woman will die from domestic violence, right? It increases the likelihood of gun suicide, of death by suicide. Speaking with a pediatrician just this morning, and she was sharing that when you look at science on suicide, it's a very fleeting moment where somebody makes that decision to take their life. When you try it with a gun, you're successful 90% of the time. When you try it with things like pills, you fail 90% of the time. And the other stat she shared was that most people who attempt suicide and fail do not attempt it again. I've lost 2 friends to gun suicide in my life, and we know that laws like this will reduce that likelihood. It shouldn't even be that hard to think through, right? That a gun in the home adds risk, right? It's intuitive. But the gun industry has spent the last 3 or 4 decades trying to sell you on the opposite, right? That a gun makes you safer. And we know that's not true, right? We have the data and see it. But we look at, during the pandemic, gun sales skyrocketed. Many to first-time gun buyers because they felt fear, right? Gun sales are skyrocketing this week because of Uvalde and Buffalo, because people are fearful. And the gun industry has taught them, if you're afraid, get a gun. But we know that that's only going to lead to greater death. So we appreciate the work here. New York has always been a leader in gun violence prevention. We have the 3rd strongest gun violence prevention laws in the country, and we have the 5th lowest rate of gun violence in the country. Don't take offense, media, but you wouldn't know that all the time by listening to media. At least the national media thinks New York, we are safer. And today, we know that the New York State Legislature is working on a package of 10 more bills that are going to make us even safer. But we need to, it's a partnership. It has to be the federal level, the state level, and local. New York passed its secure storage law in 2019, the state, but we had a secure storage law here in the county before that. So Westchester can be leaders and New York can be leaders. So in closing, I just want to thank you all. And, that I also want to note that gun violence prevention sometimes becomes a partisan issue, but I'm thrilled here that at the county level, we've come together on a bipartisan basis to pass this unanimously. So thank you all for everything.
Thank you, Barry. And we are often the leaders. We pass things in Westchester County first, and then the state sees that it works out here, and then they take it up. So we hope that our state representatives are listening to this press conference either live or in the future. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for, I'd like to introduce the county executive, George Latimer, a man who has taken this issue seriously from day one. Thank you, George.
There's a phrase that says the pen is mightier than the sword. And since we don't use swords quite as much as we seem to use guns in this society, then I can say this pen will be mightier than the gun. Let me first congratulate Chairwoman Borgia and my colleagues, and they are colleagues in government in the county legislature, for this legislation. I think it's important to understand this is how a legislative government works, and this is how a small d democratic government works. It works with a legislature where people are elected from different parts of the county. They bring their own personality to the table. They bring their own ideas. That does not always mesh easily, but that is the give and take of democracy. Every form of government has had an executive of some sort, whether it was a military leader or a religious leader or a hereditary monarch. But only in a democracy do you have a legislative body where people send representatives, as you see the diversity of my colleagues in the county legislature. If I'm a little proud, it's because I spent 13 years as a member of this legislature, and I served as its chair when we did the legislation for safe storage in Westchester County. And this is an example, and you, Madam Chair, and all of you should be very proud of your role today, what you've accomplished. My role is rather simple in signing it into law, and that is the meshing of the two branches working together. I do want to share a story. I'll try to tell the anecdote as quickly as I can. I've told it before in other contexts. When I was about 11 years old, I remember a conversation at my dinner table in my parents' home. My father and my mother were talking, at my father's insistence, about what had just been released in what was called the Surgeon General's Report, 1964 or 5, on smoking. And it was the first time that a government agency had identified what the potential, at that time, potential problems were in smoking. And I remember as a kid, anybody in my age category, a little older than me, knew that every adult smoked. And that was a rite of passage, in the same way that when you were old enough to shave, you'd shave. You were old enough to smoke, you smoked. And we, as kids, we'd even play with little pencils as if they were cigarettes to imitate what an adult would do. And the discussion at that table, and I have to tell you, my mom and dad were good, solid people, blue collar, dropped out of school, depression, worked with their hands all their life. They were having a conversation about what this report meant to them because they were both smokers. And I never read the report at that stage in my life, but I understood that it meant smoking could be dangerous, which was hard to envision because everybody smoked. And my father took the message, he took the warning and said to my mom, we have to stop smoking. And my mother, Lord love her, wonderful woman to me, was more addicted to smoking and found it impossible to do that. My father stopped cold turkey. My mother continued to smoke much, much later into her life. At the time of this story, my mother was somewhere in the vicinity of being 40 years of age, and my father was slightly older than that, late 40s. Well, the unfortunate, sad story is that while I've lost both parents, my father lived just shy of his 83rd year. My mother died at age 74. And while it's not directly attributable to that, it was a contributing factor in my mother's earlier passage. And I think about that when we get warnings of any sort. That warning was the beginning of a warning that later on became much more direct on the pack of cigarettes that said cigarettes can kill you. In the beginning, it was may cause and there was qualifiers, but it was a warning. All it was a warning. But the taking seriously of that warning saved lives. People lived longer, and people that might have died earlier lived longer and more productive lives because it was a warning and it was taken seriously. A number of years later, when I was in the county legislature, before I was chairman of the board, we enacted at the county level legislation that restricted where you could smoke. You could not smoke at the breakfast table in a restaurant. You could not smoke in a bar. And I must tell you, as you no doubt will experience with people who disagree with the decisions that we make, I had people up close and personal to me. One guy I thought was about ready to take a slug at me. It was about 20 years ago, so I would have slugged him back. And I might still slug him back. But the reality at that point in time was they were furious that they wouldn't be able to smoke when they went to a bar. Inconceivable that they wouldn't smoke at their workspace. Inconceivable that they wouldn't smoke at the dinner table. So over 25 years ago, that changed. We never made cigarettes illegal. That was not within our authority. We did not vilify the people that were smoking specifically, but we saw a health problem, and we did what we as county legislators and county officials could do. And to this day, we have a higher we have a higher situation of people living longer. We have a lower amount of people dying of lung cancer that began with the warning and the legislation that followed that warning. We get warned all the time. You buy a new car, you get all kinds of warnings about how to operate the vehicle. If you go to the pharmacy and you get even a pack of aspirin, there's a warning on the label that tells you something, and you ought to pay attention to it so that you don't overdose yourself. There are warnings when you buy a house. If you've ever done a house closing, there's innumerable number of things that you have to sign, and you're told about this and you're told about that. This is a practical warning. This is a way to remind people that while you practice your amendment, your Second Amendment freedoms, there is a potential jeopardy in doing so. And you must know that, and you must assess it as an intelligent, rational person. In that regard, what I'm going to sign right now is completely in keeping with the kind of warnings that we put out about when you buy your house, when you drive your car, and what you do about smoking. This is not radical, this is rational. And Westchester County is a rational, pragmatic county that does things to help people live longer lives and live better lives. And I compliment the Board of Legislators, and by the power that the voters have given you to pass this, they now give me the opportunity to sign it and make it law.
So, in conclusion, I want to remind everyone that knowledge is power, and that wear orange tomorrow, but advocate against gun violence at every level of government every single day. I'll take some questions.
Yeah, so you spoke about how Westchester is a leader in a lot of things.
Yes.
I'm assuming there's really nothing like this in New York, possibly in other parts of the country. So how likely is this going to be challenged? And how confident are you that this can stand?
I think it's going to stand. I don't think that there's anything that is in any way challengeable, frankly. We passed it on a bipartisan basis. As always, we had rigorous discussion at our committee table. We don't think that there's any kind of interested party who could suggest that it any way infringes on any rights. So we believe it's going to stand, and we're going to make it our mission to encourage the state to make it a statewide law. And we like nothing better than when our Westchester County laws get preempted, so that the good things that we do here in Westchester County can benefit everyone in New York State.
How soon will these labels be required to be posted?
I don't recall the 60 days. 90 days. 90 days. So we are giving some time. There is exact wording. There already are, because this is America. There already are vendors who have contacted gun shop owners to suggest that they could make signs for them. We don't care what the signs look like as long as they have the words, but it is obviously an opportunity for other businesses. So we know that everyone's poised and ready to go. And quite frankly, we did not hear a lot of pushback from our vendors. So we think it's going to be something that, that is pretty easy to accommodate, and we expect compliance.
And who will be enforcing or checking to make sure these things
So that's a good question. I believe that we do have the consumer protection officers who do a lot of checking in vendors in Westchester County who will be doing this. But we also think there'll be a lot of self-compliance. It's not like it's a overwhelming industry in Westchester County, and we believe that people know about this law, will know about this law, and it's not going to be difficult to comply with this law. So was chosen, yes. Yes, it was chosen. The history of gun shows at Westchester County is somewhat fraught, because when terrible tragedies have happened, gun shows have been canceled here. It wasn't until County Executive Latimer became county executive and issued an executive order, which we then codified at the board, that we said it's inappropriate. Because if it's inappropriate to have a gun show after 20 plus children and teachers were massacred at Sandy Hook, it's inappropriate to have a gun show any day of the year. So we are very proud of that law in Westchester County.
My last question, is there any other gun legislation that's up and coming that you guys are exploring right now?
Well, we don't have anything on the books, but yes, we have plenty of ideas. So stay tuned. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. I think that concludes this press conference. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, George, for signing this and making it law today. Thank you.